This week, we're swapping 4 wheels for 2 on F1 Beyond the Grid and bringing you a special episode with motorcycling royalty. Australian legend Mick Doohan won 5 consecutive 500cc World Championships. And while his sporting success came on 2 wheels, Mick also understands the intricacies of Formula 1. He's spent more than 30 years in and around the F1 paddock, and he's formed firm friendships with some of the sport's biggest names.
Schumacher and I were both world champions in 94, and he was my neighbour in 94 as well, and then we used to bounce ideas off each other. Because we're in a different discipline, we could actually discuss the mindset of the way we went racing and qualifying and a whole bunch of different things, and we knew we weren't giving away our secrets because we weren't racing against. He had too many wheels.
At times, both Doohan and Schumacher were invincible. They transcended their sports. They are the perfect inspiration for Mick's son Jack, a multiple Formula 2 race winner with lofty ambitions of his own.
It's his dream to make it all the way to the top, so the cliff is as steep as it could be at that point. You've got to be in the right spot at the right time, not getting carried away with what you hear and what other people say, and stay out of the controversy, basically. If I can help in any way, shape or form, then I'll try and do that, and that's why I'm at most of the races when he attends.
Hello and welcome to F1 Beyond the Grid with me, Tom Clarkson. Mick Doohan is one of the most successful bike racers of all time. He dominated his sport in the way that Schumacher, Hamilton and now Verstappen have done in Formula 1. But Mick had to overcome serious obstacles to fulfill his dreams. While leading the championship in 1992, he suffered a serious crash that almost led to the amputation of his right leg. The fact that he went on to win the championship just 2 years later and dominate the following 4 seasons speaks volumes about his mentality and his courage. I find out what made him a serial winner and how that attitude is applicable in Formula 1. We also discuss his deep friendship with Michael Schumacher, his F1 test drive with Williams in 1998, and how the art of racing on 2 wheels compares to 4. Mick also talks about the challenges that his son Jack faces in his quest for a seat in Formula 1 and what impact the Alpine Young Driver programme is having on his development. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Mick, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
You had a phenomenal bike racing career. You won 5 consecutive world titles from 1994 to 98 and 54 races. What made you such a strong competitor?
The easy answer is I don't really know. It's a long way from Australia to come to Europe to race. You know, I've always been competitive growing up racing dirt bikes and whatever else. But more to the point, come to Europe, it's a long way to go home and wish you would have done a little bit better or tried a little bit harder or done this a little bit differently. So just applied myself correctly, did everything I needed to do to make sure that I was going to be difficult to beat.
Well, you were renowned for having a killer instinct. Is that a prerequisite for all serial winners in motorsport?
I think in any sport or anything, really, losing... they give you a second and third place, but you're still lost at the end of the day. It's great, you feel good, but what have you missed out on? What's the difference between second and first? Well, there's not a great deal. So it's just working a little bit harder and thinking it through a little bit differently. So that's really the ingredient that the secret sauce is of everyone's favourite saying at the moment. But that's really what you got to find.
And when you were winning everything, and I'm thinking in particular of 1997 when you won 12 of the opening 13 races in MotoGP, how does that affect your confidence in what you're doing?
When you don't win the 13th. But
do you feel like you can almost walk on water when it's going so well? It does,
and I guess that's the thing with Max. He's got so much confidence at the moment, and I'm not trying to put myself in his shoes or by any stretch of the imagination, but the more you win, the more confident you get, and then so you get away with a lot more because you just manhandle the bike to where you feel invincible. It has to be a massive incident or moment on the bike before you're really letting go of it. You're sort of fighting it to the death, and And, in years gone by, in the most recent past, you've seen that with Marc Marquez. And more to the point now, he's losing a lot more. Number one, because I think he's lost a bit of that confidence in what he can get away with on the bike. But it does build confidence. The more you win and the more you're winning by a margin, it generally, even if you start at the back of the grid, you feel that you've got a chance at winning.
And when you're winning repeatedly, are you in a permanent state of paranoia? Are you terrified that the success is going to end?
Well, I guess you know what's going to end. That's the thing. So you work harder, and that's the problem. Like, you put yourself under pressure each year and each week because you don't know who your competitor is going to be year in, year out, or how hard they're pushing themselves, or what drives them race in, race out. And so until you got to the start of the season, you didn't really know. So all I knew is I had to continually work on myself and to push myself to be better than I was the race before or the year before.
You've been embedded in the Formula One paddock for more than 30 years now. When you look at the guys that have achieved in Formula One what you did on bikes, do you see a lot of yourself in them? And I'm thinking of Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen today.
Look, I don't know. The discipline's different, and I think, but the application, the way you go racing is pretty similar. How you prepare yourself is, at the end of the day, the sports, it's all about the mind games, and it's not so much playing games with other people, but within yourself. How you apply yourself, how confident you are, building the team around you, directing engineers with what you want. So I think there's a lot of similarities there, and you mentioned Schumacher. Schumacher and I were both world champions in '94. And he was my neighbour in '94 as well. And then we used to bounce ideas off each other. Because we're in a different discipline, we could actually discuss the mindset of the way we went racing and qualifying and a whole bunch of different things. And we knew we weren't giving away our secrets because we weren't racing against. He had too many wheels.
Well, Mick, let's talk about four wheels and you, because I don't know how many people listening will know this, but back in 1998, you were winning the World Championship on two wheels, but you also tested for Williams at Barcelona in the FW20. How was that experience?
Interesting. It wasn't really a test, that was the main thing. It was Tom Mackinnon, World Rally Champion, Jacques Villeneuve, and myself were all sponsored by the same tobacco company at that point in time. Different branding, although I had the same as a personal sponsor, the same as Jack. But it was just, share each other's vehicles essentially. But Frank Williams decided not to let Jack on the bike after he'd learned of Carlos Sainz going straight ahead. He would brake a little bit too late on the bike thinking he was in a car and went straight off in turn one at Barcelona. But anyway, so we went out and I spun the car on the first lap out because it was the first car I'd been in that had similar sort of power to what the bike was, so everything else you could just jump on the gas and the thing would slowly get away. Well, the F1 caught me out a little bit. So, I apologise for that. I spun and just clipped the inside wall, I think on turn 4 or something like that anyway in Barcelona. Could have been 5, the right hand or whatever that is. And
did that infuriate you, the competitor in you?
It did, to be honest, because it's like, I thought I was good getting out of the box, because first time getting out with a hand clutch and all this type of thing. So that was all good. To make me feel better, and I'm sure it was only that, Jacques told me he spun twice on his first lap out in a Formula One car, and Tommy after me made it one turn further than me before spinning. But look, that was all about a promotion, so it was about half a dozen laps, 10 laps perhaps, and then it was about a 3-hour PR media scrum. So Ron Dennis, in fact, used to ask me all the time to come and test the McLaren, but I wasn't interested. So, my downtime was all about having some downtime because back in those days there used to be a lot more testing. So you didn't even though there was only 15, 16 rounds, there was never much downtime. So the last thing I wanted to do was go and jump in a car just for some publicity, mainly for them, and then I was never going to race cars anyway. So back to that Williams day, it was a great experience, but I had no intention of ever wanting to be a car racer, and I was going for a test after that. So once I'd spun the car, my thoughts were, again, as you say, I was leading the World Championship, was about going to the test to continue to try and win that World Championship rather than to see how quick I could go in a Formula One car.
What about the performance of the F1 car? That was the first year of groove tyres, and I think the sport was still getting used to that idea. But what impressed you the most?
It was the only thing that was quick, and how quick it accelerated and how quick it got me from point A to point B, similar to the bike. The only difference in sensation was a bike, you're over the top of it, you're hanging onto it, you're digging the soles of your feet into the footrests and you're hanging onto the handlebars on the straight line, whereas this thing's just pushing you and it just continually pushed you from the back. But on the bike in Barcelona, top speed's a little bit quicker than the F1 car, but we brake at the 200 metre point. It was all good until I got to the 200 metre point. As soon as I went past the 200 metre point, my brain is telling me to brake. So I'd jump on the brake and then have to accelerate again before I got to the turn. But that was what I noticed, is just how quick the point-to-point speed of the car, and then getting, as I say, it was such a short test to get my head around the downforce.
Did you find it very restrictive? The belts are tight, whereas, as you've said, you're hanging onto a bike.
That didn't concern me, honestly, too much at all. It was just a different sensation completely. So, as a bike guy, I think you've seen Valentino and a few of the other guys who have transitioned. It gives you a false sense of security as a bike guy. You haven't got that sort of safety harness on a bike and or anything else. So,
interesting that you mentioned Valentino Rossi there, because there was a period of about 5 years in the early noughties where he looked pretty serious about Formula One. I remember him testing in 2006 at Valencia alongside Schumacher, and I think he was close. He was 0.7, I think, off Michael. What did you make of that? And do you think Valentino was serious about Formula One? Have you spoken to him about it?
Yeah, I Valentino, amazingly talented guy, very smart intellectually, and as you say, whether it be half a second, whether it be 0.2, whether it be whatever the time difference is, Valentino is smart. He knows that after an hour and a half at 0.2 off the pace, at your best lap, you're going to be a fair way behind, and that takes the years of doing karting, doing racing, to find those extra, whether it be a second, whether it be half a second, those last few tenths take that time. And I think Valentino was smart enough to stay in his lane and keep just stay on two wheels.
For most of us, learning a second language in school wasn't exactly a high point in our academic careers. The closest I got to a second language was French, and I even tried speaking to F1 driver Olivier Panis in French when I first met him in the 90s. The conversation didn't go well. Now, however, thanks to Babbel, there's an addictively fun and easy way to learn a new language. Whether you'll be travelling abroad, connecting in a deeper way with family, or you just have some free time, Babbel teaches bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world. Babbel makes learning a language quick and easy because it focuses on natural conversation. Their 15-minute lessons are designed to be the most efficient and effective way to learn a new language. Babbel lessons are created by more than 150 language experts, meaning real people, so you learn how to have real-world conversations. With Babbel, you can choose from 14 different languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, and German. In addition to lessons, you can access podcasts, games, videos, or even join live classes with a language teacher. Right now, Babbel is offering our listeners 3 months free with a purchase of a 3-month subscription with the promo code BEYOND. Go to babbel.com/podcast23 and use the promo code BEYOND for an extra 3 months free. That's Babbel, BABBEL.com/podcast23, promo code BEYOND. Babbel, language learning that works. Are the disciplines of bike racing and Formula One as different as they look? Is it rugby and football, or are there more similarities than look at face value?
You probably put it right there. I think it's similar to football and rugby. There's a lot of similarities there, but it's just a different discipline. And, the lines are different, the braking style's different on a bike in comparison to a car, but the mindset's the same. And what you want to achieve, how you go about achieving it, what you're thinking about on the track. Obviously, you got a wider machine to pass, but I mean, you're still calculating exactly what's going on.
Had you started karting at the age of 4, do you think in terms of the feel and the discipline you have, you could have made it as a race car driver? And equally, had Lewis Hamilton started bike racing at an early age, could he have made it?
Well, like that's there.
I mean, it's a slightly outrageous question, but I'm interested
could be
to get
applied
your
to
thoughts.
a bunch of different things. But look, there's plenty of bike guys, including Lewis, who've jumped on the bike and is reasonably quick. And likewise, Michael Schumacher was the same thing. I went on the track with him a couple of times, and he was quick, but he still had the same mindset of driving a car as he did when he was riding a bike, so he had to adapt that. So, which you don't do it for. Well, just with the braking, like everything was about the last minute brake in a straight line and then tip it in and not try and balance the bike because, the cars all set a little bit different. So again, yes, I think he or Lewis probably, had they just pushed, they'd be a top racer, the same as Damon Hill. In fact, like he wanted to go racing, I'm not sure, with bikes. I'm not sure what happened there in the end, but the feel is similar. And as I say, the bike, there's not too many car guys who sort of can transition into the bike side of things, whereas there's been a few bike guys who have been able to transition the other way. I mean, Johnny Cicotto, is one, and, a few other guys who've moved on and not at this level. Well, I think Surtees did a pretty good job.
Well, he won. That's a really good example, right? He won world titles on 2 wheels
That's right.
and 4. Describe the scale of John Surtees' achievement.
Look, one, he was an amazing chap, but the popularity of bikes were pretty strong. And back in those days as well, the bikes were, it was an everyday. A lot more people had bikes to just commute around on, so the popularity was huge. And so there was a few of the guys who tried to do it, but Surtees managed to do it on both. I'm not sure who he was with in the end, with MV Agusta, I think, on bikes, and then he went Ferrari, was it, in F1. But an amazing feat, and nobody's done it to date. But I'm dumbing it down a little bit by saying that things probably are different today than they were back then. But because I'm not there, who knows? It may have just been as difficult.
And in 1960, Surtees was flip-flopping between Formula One and bikes. He won the 500cc world title that year, but he also finished second in the British Grand Prix in Formula One. How hard is it to flip-flop between the two?
I think today that's just not possible. One, I don't think regulations allow, but two, it's just a lot more intensity around both sports today. I think not devaluing anything from what they were back then, but you're involved with the paddock here, and the paddock in the MotoGP isn't far removed from here either. So there's a lot of demand on the rider driver's time at both of those. So to switch mindset and to switch just between the two would be near impossible, I would have thought. And the same as the likes of Agostini. I'm not sure whether Agostini drove cars or not or did anything, but he was riding the 500, then the 350 and the 250 all on the same day and winning all races. So, it's just unheard of these days.
Can we talk a little bit more about Schumacher now? As you say, you got to know him in the 90s when he was at Benetton. Now, he was pretty intense when he was here at the racetrack, laser focused. Did you ever see the relaxed side of Michael Schumacher?
Yeah, absolutely, and like a really nice guy and fairly chilled. When you'd see him away, I'd see him here at the circuit as well at the races, and you knew when to stay away from him. But I mean, I don't mind that in somebody. He's here. I'm coming to his office, and likewise if he's coming to mine. So I'm not there to disrupt him while he's in the middle of a deal, sort of thing. And so I understand that, and that's what made him as who he was. But no, I got to know him well. I knew him well. We understood each other a little bit. But likewise, I probably wasn't that intense, but I wasn't that user-friendly in the paddock sometimes either.
What floated his boat away from racing? I mean, you got him into bikes, but was there anything else that he was particularly interested in that you saw?
He was just action, well, whatever you call it, one of those figurines, So he was into everything. So, but he loved his, skydiving. I think that's well known, and scuba diving, and bikes, and football, and whatever else. So he never sat around and wondered about life, and I think that was great. He was always on the go doing something. But as I say, away from the track, we wouldn't, and the same today, I'm sure, we don't go away and start talking about, if, buts and maybes and what's happening on the racetrack. There might be a couple of moments of that, but you're talking about other hobbies, a bit of a laugh on this and a laugh on that, and what are we up to and where we're going and this type of thing. So just a normal friendship, to be honest.
You say it was just a normal friendship, but is it true that Mick Schumacher is called Mick after your good
I
self?
believe so. But I mean, he's probably disappointed he's not called Michael. But but no, that's very cool. But I think also it helps differentiate. He's still Michael, I guess, but Mick. So one's Mick, one's Michael. So, I intentionally didn't do that to Jack because I had a father and my brother and my grandfather. They're all named Colin. So I didn't want to do a junior type of thing. So
the Australian driver looks up and sees the checkered flag first. Jack Doohan wins again in Belgium. He punches the air with delight. 11th on the grid to first at the flag, and he will feel that is some of the luck paid back for the start of the year. His dad is delighted.
Yes! Yes!
You mentioned your son, Jack. Let's talk about him now because, both him and Mick Schumacher are trying to muscle their way, in Mick's case, back onto the grid. In Jack's case, trying to get onto the F1 grid for the first time. You're, I'm sure, very involved in Jack's career, but tell us how hard it is for a young guy who's winning in Formula 2 to make that last step.
The cliff is as steep as it could be at that point. At least you've got some footholds to climb to get to F1, but then you've only got 20 seats, and at any given point in time there may be one or two seats available. So and then how fluid the paddock moves, and then the commercial aspect of it. So you've got to be in the right spot at the right time with the right deal in place. So it's forever moving. So that's it's his dream to make it all the way to the top. So if I can help in any way, shape or form, then I'll try and do that. And that's why I'm at most of the races when he attends.
What's the biggest lesson you learnt in your career that can help Jack?
I think just not getting caught up in the bullshit, to be honest, and I mean that by not getting carried away with what you hear and what other people say, and so just stay. Let's say it again: stay in your lane, focus, do the best job you can, and stay out of the controversy. Basically, that's at the end of the day, you're a driver, and never forget that.
He's part of the Alpine Academy, and I remember a year ago there was quite a lot of talk of him maybe getting the seat that Alonso was vacating. Can you give us your thoughts on the Alpine Academy, but also these junior academies in general, in terms of what do they do for a young driver?
Alpine has been a great direction to put Jack in or on. From the outset, from day one, it's about making him a better driver and the others in the academy, just preparing them as if they ever get the opportunity to be an F1 driver, that they're prepared for that position. And I think that's what I can see with Alpine. They're actually doing a great job. And last year there was with Alonso unexpectedly leaving, and then Oscar Piastri sort of jumping ship to McLaren, there was a slight opportunity, but unfortunately for Jack, the experience decided on taking an experienced driver there. So, but we've seen in the past that taking some risks sometimes can reward the team.
And what's the biggest thing that Jack has got out of the academy? Is it driving the 2-year-old car?
I think beyond that, I think, yes, that's been a plus. I think, getting the mileage up in that. He's got a number of, thousands of kilometres now under his belt in that. But working with the engineers, when the debriefs, the pre-briefs, working with the engineers during the F1 events. So he's got a full understanding of what it takes to be a driver, what they're doing behind the scenes, what Pierre and Esteban are up to. So it's like it's a junior school. He's going and actually getting the education and understanding what he needs and how he can better himself to go forward.
But Mick, what do you do when there's no space in Formula One. Both Ocon and Gasly have contracts for 2024. Jack has proven himself in Formula 2. So what do you do next?
Other than him continually pushing himself to better himself and to do what he can in the F2 car, and also when he's working with the F1 team and driving the 21 car, is to make sure that he's in the right position, best spot to fill a seat if and when one does become available, because he's now in that position. So you'd hope, okay, even if there's not one in 24, perhaps there'll be an option for 25, because otherwise they need to start to prepare another young driver to come through to put in that position. So, it's expensive, the investment that they're already putting into Jack to prepare him for Formula One. You would hope that that's not all just for the sake of it and not actually being put to good use, that we're going to reap the rewards of that investment that we're actually sort of putting in the kid.
While we're on the topic generally of contracts, there's one aspect of your own career that I find fascinating, which is that you signed one-year deals. Whereas it seems to me in F1 at the minute, everyone's after the longer-term deal. First, why only 1 year for you?
Well, one, when I was starting to do that, I was in a strong position. And then two, the other manufacturers weren't signing long-term contracts, so it enabled me to leverage my position every year. So
I was interested. That was the reason.
Pretty much.
You
so.
were the man. If you want me,
That's
you can
right.
have me for a year, and we'll renegotiate.
That's right, and I'm sure the same in this paddock. You couldn't go around sort of making up fictitious numbers and deals and whatever you do, and everyone talks. But I mean, it still sort of moved the goalposts every year of where we needed to be. And, unfortunately, in one of the years, it didn't work out so well, but it still didn't. I didn't go backwards, but I mean, I was just everyone trying to fill my shoes. That was all when I was injured. So, but it certainly put me in a strong position to negotiate and drag it out throughout the course of the year. And it would come down. It wouldn't always just come down to the monetary side of it, but it'd be, what else are you going to? What's the development team look like? What's the engineering team look like? So it had to. It was a whole package. It wasn't just give me another $1 and I'm happy to sign for you guys. And Honda would always end up coming to the party. And it wasn't really until they ended up signing Valentino Rossi, the Yamaha decided to make full commitment, and I was general manager of Honda Racing at that point in time, because I'd signed Valentino to be my teammate in 2000, and then Honda took me out of it. Digressing a bit here, but took me out of that contract when they knew I was going to be competing against them, but not riding, because I ended up retiring through injury. But I had told them they better sign up all the engineers and mechanics, because I believe he's going. And Honda said to me, we know racing. So that was the start of me leaving that position. And because I was doing exactly the same thing. If I was going somewhere, all my guys were going with me. And back to Formula One, Schumacher when he moved, took a bunch of his people away with him, and that's the best way to do things.
You know what works for you, so therefore you stick with it. Lewis has had Pete Bonington as his race engineer for years.
Yeah, and it's a pretty simple.
Jerry Burgess in your case.
That's right, yeah. And then Valentino inherited all my old team, but both in MotoGP and I'm sure here now, it's a little bit harder to sort of just take your team and go to next door's garage. So. But back in those days, that was the whole thing. So it was just sort of changing the manufacturer, but not the team, essentially.
I can see why the 1 year contract worked for you. You were at the top of your game. You were winning. You were calling the shots. For someone like Jack, who is trying to get into Formula One, is the opposite true? Are you trying to get a long-term deal with an F1 team?
Even for myself, the first 2 year deal, the first contract, I should say, was a multi-year deal, and as a young driver, you'd certainly want a multi-year contract, and I think even now the teams also, they want to sort of know that their investment, they're going to get a couple of years out of their driver, and the same if you're the sponsor, you probably want to know if you're throwing your money towards somebody like Lewis or Max or any other driver on the grid, that you want to know a little bit of consistency there.
With the busy second half of the Formula One season now in full swing, I'm looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days, like when I'm travelling to races, hosting the drivers' press conferences, or recording these Formula One podcasts. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up fast with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Because with Factor, you can skip the extra trip to the grocery store and the chopping and the prepping and the cleaning up as well, while still getting the flavour and the nutritional quality you need. And you can choose from more than 34 weekly flavour-packed, fresh never frozen meals that are ready in 2 minutes. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccolini, leeks, truffle butter and asparagus, and I highly recommend all of those. They're very delicious. And this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavour-packed meals delivered to your door, ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/BTG50 and use the code BTG50 to get 50% off. That's code BTG50 at factormeals.com/BTG50 to get 50% off. And from a safety point of view, can we come on to that now? Are you pleased that Jack is racing cars and not bikes?
I think as a parent, for sure. But that was his own doing as well. Like, he likes surfing, rugby, and his friends were karting. Again, back to the Schumachers. Schumachers helped with some karts for both his sister and Jack when they were young in Australia. Got a go-kart track at home. So, for the bigger kids, that was mainly. So he grew up around the karting, so he headed off on that way. But yes, it's easier to watch him racing, but it's still, as a parent, you're worried about what you can't control. And, I feel he can drive, but you just don't know what else is going to happen.
And Mick, when you were riding, what was your attitude to danger? I was always scared to hurt myself. Like, I think you need to have a fair amount of a healthy dose of fear. Otherwise, you're going to be a danger to yourself and everybody else around you. So, people say you're fearless. I don't believe that's the case. You need to prepare yourself and calculate exactly what you're doing. And I think preparation is the key to success. How can you're working with your engineers, how you can prepare yourself both mentally, physically, and with the team to minimise the risk. And so how did you justify the risk in your mind?
I think the more you do it, it doesn't seem so risky. It's probably like a fighter pilot as well. You only crash an aircraft once generally, unless you can eject. But with the cars, bikes, or whatever, it's again minimises the risk and justifying and just better understanding. So the better you understand it, so the more risk you can take, and the more confident you get, the more risk you take because you feel you're in control of it. So, it's inevitable that you're going to crash. Nobody gets away with not crashing, but you sort of try and manage that as best as you can, both from a mental standpoint and with preparation. But unfortunately, accidents happen, and that's the unknown within motorsport, but in life.
You had some horrendous crashes, and none more so than at Assen in 1992. What happened there?
Essentially I broke my own leg, really. And you look at me funny because it's that they just red flagged the session as I was breaking in a set of pistons, because they were 2 strokes. So we'd never start a race with more than about 125 kilometres on the pistons. So I was just breaking a set in to leave that, and then I was going for a flying lap, and just as I went over the start-finish line, they red flagged it because somebody had dropped some fluid. I went into turn 1, which was about 160 odd kilometres an hour, and the bike just snapped sideways, flicked me over, and I'm sliding up the road, but the bike's on top of me. Normally you'd slide off the track even if it was on top of you, and then the grass or the gravel, you'd separate. Well, I'm going up the road and it's starting to get a bit warm, the weight of the bike on me, not the heat of the bike, but the friction. So I tried to spin out from underneath it. Everything spun except for my leg, of course. So then when I went to stand up, I could feel my the bones grind, and I went, sat back down straight away and put the hand up to ask for a bit of assistance. But, more to the point, I was leading the World Championship, and straight away I was like, shit, because I'd almost won the year before. And then
you were
I knew
60-odd points ahead at that point.
Yeah, well, Rainey had gone home. The guy I was racing with in the championship, he beat me by a few points the year before on a count back. So that was a more disappointment. But then I was in a rush to get going, and being 2 weekends off, and then there was Hungary, Budapest. So 2 weekends off, I thought, well, if I just put some metal in there, bolt the leg back together, I can be up and running. I won't be strong, but I can, try and manage a few points and keep running. And the Italian doctor, Dr. Costa, who ended up saving my leg, he said, look, the best thing to do is do nothing, and you'll be back in 6 weeks or so in Brazil. We just put it in a plaster cast. It's nothing to...
No metal was his advice.
No metal, yeah. Just put it in a plaster cast. Okay, you're going to miss some races, and whatever, but then you'll be strong. You might be able to challenge for the championship. And so that wasn't something I wanted to hear. So I said to the doctors there, and then the Dutch doctors, who's the best guy here to, bolt a leg back together? And he's basically, and I remember that, I thought it was odd even then, but he said, we all went to the same university here. We all learnt the same skills. And so, kind of, again, not really what I wanted to hear, but okay, let's go. And that was at the start of the end. He basically messed up, and what's called a compartment syndrome set in, and then my leg got necrotic. They were going to amputate the leg. Thankfully, Costa took me back to Italy, saved the leg, ended up sewing the leg together.
So
to my
sewing your
my left
two
leg, to
legs
my
together.
right leg.
Why?
For blood supply, and then also for skin because again, where it had gone necrotic or gangrene, for the easier term that people would probably understand. They dug that out with a spoon, basically like a teaspoon, and then all of a sudden I can see this hardware, I can see my bone, I can see the tendon, and I'm thinking, well, this doesn't look like the year's going to end well. And so then the option was to sit around for a long while anyway, and then get a free flap from my other backside or back or something, and come back in a year or so's time. Now, that wasn't an option. So bolting the legs together, that wasn't an option, which they've done. It's a fairly barbaric way, so nobody who was really keen to do it except for myself. But normally they'd pin your legs together. Well, that wasn't an option either, because now I've got Swiss cheese for legs. And so we ended up using Scotch cast, so fiberglass plaster cast, and sewed the legs together. Took the skin from this side, you've seen them before, and put it over here. And then, and here it was just, I wasn't able to close it back up because it was still too swollen. And took some cheese graters and took them from here and slapped it on the back to get me going. Slapped it on the back of the legs. And I was back in Brazil. And but I didn't score any points, so Wayne Rainey beat me by a few points in 92 as well.
Mick, it's an extraordinary story, and just you were lifting up your trouser leg then, showing me where they'd taken the skin from your thigh and put it on down at the front of your right leg. What are you thinking about when you're lying in hospital?
Well, back to some of the earlier conversations that we had, you're probably not thinking, because you're fully immersed into what you're doing. There's nothing else matters, and I think that's the mindset of a racer.
Did you ever question whether you wanted to continue racing?
Absolutely, and especially after the end of 92. One, I didn't have a firm contract for 94, so I couldn't really sit around and not ride, but it was just how long it took me, because it took until the beginning of 94 before I was healed from that accident. So I rode with 93 with a leg that was a malunion, and it was oozing pus out of a hole in my leg. But I had to continue.
Were you in constant pain?
It was in reasonable pain, but I mean, it's still at that point in time, it was, is this worth it? What the hell am I doing? But I still felt I had unfinished business, and I won a race with my leg like that. I ended up I couldn't use the rear brake any longer because my ankle is functionally fused. I adapted the rear brake onto my thumb, and I won a race with the leg which wasn't healed, and it was actually had a 20-degree angulation in it. And you could actually grab the ankle and grab the knee and flex the leg, and I could win. I won a race, I should say, and multiple podiums that year with the leg like that. So I knew if I got strong enough, I could perhaps win. I'm not going to be able to ride as freely as I did previously, but that was the only thing that kept me going. But the back of my mind is saying, what am I doing, you know? But like I was saying, Max, Lewis, all these guys on the grid should be fully immersed in what they're doing. Nothing else, everything else is secondary. You know, life, real life, which you don't experience until you get out of that bubble, and then you go, "What the hell was I thinking?" You know? But you know, life is long, and you know, I did 10 seasons, 89 through to 99. And, you know, it's now 2024, so I'm 15 years down, 25 years down the path. But I mean, at that point in time, nothing else matters.
Were you as good after that crash at Assen in 92 as you were before?
I'm sure it's the same with these guys, but I think mentally, yes. But physically, no. I had to move around. Like, my ankle didn't move, so I used to sort of rotate it a lot on my ankle, especially with the rear brake and modulating the bike basically and the balance, because that's the only way you sort of keep the weight transfer on the bike is the rear brake. A lot of guys didn't believe that at the time, and then until then they thought that I was cheating with the rear brake. But
why? What
because
grounds?
I could now use the rear brake, you know. But a lot of the guys today still use the handbrake.
Are there parallels between what you went through and Robert Kubica after his rally crash in 2011?
Look, everything's different, to be honest. So, again, I don't know Robert well enough. A great guy, very extremely talented, but, you know, probably the hand is probably in what he's doing in the car, probably. And, you know, the leg is extremely important because you steer the bikes through your midsection and your legs. So all I was missing out in was the braking and moving, because when I'm moving, I'm having to use a lot more. But I'm sure mentally for him, it was believing that he's still, because he's still bloody damn quick with the challenges that he faces in the car. So you know, that was very sad.
Want to win exclusive Formula One experiences and money can't buy prizes just by answering a few questions about Formula One? With Santander Lap Zero, you can be in with a chance of experiencing a Grand Prix like a VIP or getting your hands on signed F1 merchandise. And all you have to do to win is prove your knowledge by answering quiz questions on Formula One and sustainability. Here's how you play. First, go to santanderlapzero.com or search Santander Lap Zero. Then, after a simple sign-up, you'll be ready to start answering questions. You'll be trying to get as many correct answers as you can against the clock. The more quizzes you do, the more answers you get right, and the faster you answer, the higher you'll be on the global leaderboard. A VIP Formula One experience, signed F1 merchandise, and other great prizes are up for grabs. So prove your F1 knowledge, and you could be a winner. You must be 18 or over to play, and geographic restrictions apply. For more information, competition rules, full terms and conditions, and to enter, go to santanderlapzero.com. That's santanderlapzero.com or search Santander Lap Zero. Do you think racing drivers, bike riders, are you all thrill seekers, fundamentally?
Well, we don't think so, but we must be, you know. So
how have you replaced the adrenaline rush?
Thankfully, I haven't, but, you know, aviation's a big part of my life. I'm a part owner of a large trading company called Jetcraft, and operational company in Australia with another name, and I fly helicopters and I fly. So I become Mick the pilot, which almost takes me away from, you know, whereas I was Mick the bike rider, now I'm Mick the pilot. And you think, but I mean, I'm not taking risks at all. And then with that, the business side of things. So for business is a exciting time for me, and I've changed that focus from sitting on a bike to sitting in an office and working what I do.
Were the lessons you learned in racing applicable? How have they helped you in the business world? The risk-taking, the quick decision process?
Calculated risk, you know, so preparing yourself and understanding what you're doing. I think you're always going to mess up. So you don't win every deal, you don't win every race, and you're going to make mistakes, like I said. So I think as long as you're prepared for that, but as long as you're prepared, I think, and that's what sport at any level, and that's why I think sport's so good for kids regardless, because punctuality, discipline, commitment, so all that applies no matter what discipline you're doing.
Well, Mick, it has been absolutely brilliant to catch up with you. As you've said already, you're now a hugely successful businessman. Planes, I'm thinking of Thierry Boutsen when I think of buying and selling planes. He was on, we had him on the pod last year. But how much are you enjoying just being back, in the paddock, still living the racing life as well as everything else you've got going on?
Well, I must just say on Thierry, we work well with Thierry's mob. We supply them with some aircraft, and likewise sometimes, but he's more of a localised Monaco broker. We're global, but equally they're a great bunch of guys he has working for him. But enjoying being back here. It's just, I grew up sort of racing dirt bikes and then road racing and then go-karting with my son, and then so it's just part of my life. And motorsport, I sort of love it, and still watch pretty much every sort of motorsport I can get my eyes onto.
Australia seems to be in a pretty good place in Formula One as well. We've discussed Jack, and hopefully he'll get through, but you've got Oscar Piastri doing the business at McLaren as well.
Look, I think it's from Jack Brabham back in the day, to Alan Jones, and then Mark Webber, and Oscar's the man of the moment, and he's doing a great job. And thankfully, the Victorian government support both MotoGP and Formula One, and we've got the event down there for a number of years to come. But we had over 440,000 people at the event in Melbourne earlier in the year. So motorsport in general is well supported. The go-karting in Australia, the national championship, it has over 400 entrants over 9 classes, so it's a fair way from the rest of the world, but motorsport for some reasons very much enjoyed down in Australia.
And I was fascinated, let's go back to where we started, in that Australia, as you say, is a long way away. So for all the guys and girls that make the commitment to come to Europe, the stakes are high, you've got to make it work.
That's right, nothing's cheap. Motorsport isn't cheap, and you're living away from home. You're not away for a weekend or a week, or 3 weeks, when you guys complain about a few flyaways. As an Australian or a Kiwi, you're away, You might go back, for instance, my son, I think he spent 6 weeks in Australia sort of in the past 12 months. That's a pretty big commitment, and it's not just for my son, it's for other parents' kids and daughters and boys and girls. So it's a big commitment.
But you are living in the south of France, so the family is also in Europe in your case, right?
That's right. So we're a little bit different, but then equally, once it gets a bit cold, I go back to Australia.
All right. Mick, I want one final line from you, if I may, which is just the job that Max Verstappen is doing at the minute. I mean, I guess you've known Max all his life because you know Jos. He's only 25. Can he still get better from where he is now?
Mentally, without a doubt, and mentally that he'll continually learn to be a race car driver, and I'm sure Lewis and we see Alonso. So, but Max, it's just phenomenal what he's doing in that car. You can only really compare him to his teammate, but Max can come from the back of the grid to the front, and quite quickly. So he's at the top of his game, and you can probably remember being 25.
Sort of.
But I mean, that 25 to 32 area, I think you're in your best sort of space anyway, both as a human being, and you continually absorb things a lot easier to understand. So for me, from now and for his next 5 years, if he wants to stay here and dominate, I think he's got that all ahead of him.
Crikey. Well, we can look forward to that. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I loved this chat with Mick. He's a motorsport legend and someone who knows what it takes to win at the highest echelon. He's a tough nut, and it's no surprise that he was friends with Michael Schumacher. Winning is a state of mind. Mick had what it takes, Schumi had it, and the likes of Lewis, Max and others have it today. Mick, many thanks for your time. I learnt a lot, and I look forward to seeing you at a racetrack again soon. Now, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Mick. The description of his injuries left me open-mouthed. I hope you learnt a lot about winning as well, and please send me your thoughts on everything that you've just heard via all the usual means. I'm at Tom Clarkson F1 on Twitter, or you can use the hashtag F1BeyondTheGrid. Which brings me on to what you sent in after last week's show with Mercedes young driver chief Gwen Le Gru. It was fascinating to hear about how the team set about trying to find the next F1 superstar, wasn't it? Let's start with this from Philip Pegler. I absolutely loved your conversation with Gwen Le Gru, an inspiring chat revealing how a man with an incredible passion for the sport found a way to channel that passion and truly give back by nurturing and guiding talent in the perfect way. I agree with all of that, Philip. Thanks for the message. Gwen is the perfect man for the job because he understands the sport so well. Anyone on the Mercedes Young Driver programme is lucky to have him because they know that they'll be well looked after. And what about this from KJS? Another great podcast, Tom. Two very important ingredients for success stand out for me when 99.9% of racing drivers are discussing their formative years. One, supportive parents to nurture, support and encourage them. And two, you can't coach in what God left out. What a great way of putting it. Thanks for the message, KJS. And even with these thorough young driver programs, you do still need the raw ingredients in order to succeed. And what about this from Melo Sinfila? I love you so much, Gwen. Thanks to you, Esteban is doing what he loves. He certainly is. That's Esteban Ocon, of course. And Esteban's story is an incredible one, and he'll openly tell you that without Gwen, he wouldn't have made it to Formula One. What a vote of confidence that is for Gwen Le Gru. Look, we'll leave it there for messages, but thank you to everyone who got in touch because we do love reading what you have to say. Well, that's it for this episode. I'll of course be back next week with a true legend of Formula One. And remember to have a listen to our other podcasts, F1 Nation and F1 Explains. There was certainly a lot to discuss after that thrilling Singapore Grand Prix on Sunday, and all that discussion is on F1 Nation. Thanks for listening. F1 Beyond the Grid is produced by Formula One and Audio Boom Studios. Until next time, keep it flat out.